So we're live, and Joe Tolle is ran off to get coffee, but that's okay. That means I get to do my housekeeping. We need to thank Elka Suspension for taking care of us and bringing ATV Talk, the morning show, to you. Also, GBC Tires. These guys have a tire for every application and everything that you want to go do. So make sure you get a set of GBC tires on your ATV, UTV, your truck, your trailer, whatever it is. Make sure you get a set of tires. The Blunt family for always supporting ATV Talk and bringing you guys these the morning show, the regular podcast shows, the Instagram lives. That's what they're for, and they help us out a great deal. Craig Christie is also involved in making sure that ATV Talk gets to bring you as many episodes as possible, as well as Antelope Slot Canyon tours. If you're on vacation in Arizona, book a tour. If you're in Vegas, you can get a bus ride over there. You might even be able to take a helicopter over. So you want to check that out as well. So, Joe, how are you, bud?
I'm good. I decided to go horizontal today instead of vertical. I don't know why I've been doing this vertical shit for the past 6 months we're on here. Because then I watched last Sunday and your camera is horizontal, and I'm like, why am I filming like a Gen Z millennial? So
Uh, because you're just more technically savvy than the rest of us, I guess.
no, I've been doing it wrong all these shows, but now you can see all of me.
Everything. So,
Wow.
what's up with the Hulkamania before we get into it today?
I won't be ripping my shirt off. This came from Hogan's Beach store. My nephew got it for me when he was down there. Where I don't care what people think. I'm a lifelong pro wrestling fan. It's fake, and let me hit you in the head with a chair. So,
As long as you're having a good time, that's all that matters,
right,
right?
that's all that matters.
Perfect, perfect. So, before we get into some of the meat of the things that we're going to talk about today, Ken Roxon rode a 250 yesterday. You got to watch it. His results weren't very good.
I didn't. I'll be honest. I turned it on late last night. I kind of tuned out. I watched probably the first half of the outdoors, and it's a big commitment to watch an outdoor because the motos are way longer. And I mean, you watch it. But yeah, it was cool. I watched the first moto. I fell asleep during moto two because it was about 1 o'clock in the morning last night. Um, but it was neat. He was in like fourth place in moto one, and it kind of started fading back. And, it was kind of an eye opener for me as well, because you think like these 450s are so brutally powerful. You can see a lot of, if you watch Gypsy Tales podcast, which is it's an excellent two-wheel podcast, but he has guys on there, every now and then they're talking like 450s are too big, they're too powerful. So you think they're so brutal, they're just way harder to ride. But then you hear the commentators talking last night, and it's like they think that part of what happened to Kenny was, well, number one, he just came back from a broken freaking leg. So he's probably not in premier condition right now. But they were saying like the 250s in ways they take a lot more out of you because you have to charge. You can't back off at times. You can't brake and then go to the inside and punch the gas because you don't have all that excess horsepower. And it was the same thing back in the 250 two-stroke, 125 two-stroke days. The guys on the 125s are taking the widest lines possible, trying to keep the momentum up. And it's the same thing with the 254 strokes versus the 454 strokes. You can't slow down and go fast. You have to stay going fast to go fast.
Momentum
So
up.
they think,
You got to keep the momentum up.
right. And they think that was taking, a lot more out of him, possibly. But it was neat. Yeah, it looks like the RM 250 can still compete. I assume somebody at Suzuki called him up and said, "Hey, you're selling some 450s for us. Do you think you can give us some help moving some of these 250s?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'll drop down." That's what I assume went on. And hey, he showed the thing can run top five.
It was I listened to a little interview with him. It was a joke that turned into a serious thing. And he enjoyed it. He was doing it because he wanted to, not because he had to. He had no commitment to it, and just wanted to go out and ride it. And you know, uh, Ian just wrote down that Kenny proves that it's not the machine that sucks, it's the riders, because he faded back, and it had nothing to do with the machine. It was just the fact that he might not be in top form because of coming back from his broken leg. I'll bet money if you put him out there when he's at his best, he's not dropping back.
No, I kind of thought he was going to just run away with it. When I first heard he was riding a 250, it's like, oh man, dropping down to the lights class. So maybe we're going to see Kenny go 1-1, but he's coming back from injury. You can't ignore that at all. But it also shows you how fast those young guys are that are coming up.
Well,
I think they said Deegan was the last time Kenny was riding a 250. Deegan, who just won the title, it was 7.
riding a KTM 60 or something like that.
Right.
That's crazy. You also saw Eli Tomac back on the 450 gate, put himself on the podium.
I didn't get through Moto 2, so I failed in that mission. But no, it's good. I'm a big Tomac fan. Dad was a national champion mountain biker. I'm a mountain biker. I'm always rooting for for Tomac. So
yeah, I went away from being a fan for a little while, and then I got to watch him ride last year a little bit, and I was super impressed with the drive that he had. So you got to take it. It's just like, Sexton. I'm not a fan of him off the track, but I got to watch him ride the other day, and man, he is a talented rider. He is so smooth and so exact, and he just puts that bike everywhere he wants to. Not like Hunter, where Hunter's just like pinning the throttle and holding on. But and maybe Hunter's not like that. Maybe it's just he's just not as smooth as Chase because he's still a rookie on the 450. But man, those guys are on the gas, and you really have to appreciate the talent and skill level it takes to ride those bikes at the level they're riding them.
I do. And not to change subjects or throw a rain cloud over it, but it was great to watch it on TV at Ironman, where I went for cross country earlier this year when we took the Raptor and raced the Hoosier. It's like, oh, I've been there. And Jen's like, my wife's sitting here on the couch, and she's like, oh, do quads race here too?
Yes, they do. Yes,
Yeah,
they do.
and that's a problem with our sport.
Yep.
I would have loved to have sat there and watched, the pro quads go around that track on my 70-inch TV, playing through surround sound, like I do with the dirt bikes. But that doesn't happen because they don't treat us right. Next.
I totally agree that the promotions and the way they handle it is total bull crap, and they should this is my format, which I think would be the best. You run the pro 450s, then you run the freaking pro quad 450s, then you can run the bike 250s, and then whatever, that could be your show.
Oh, here we go. All right. Well, I was having this discussion the other day, and respectfully, I disagree, only because I do think, on a modern track, if you go back to a Carlsbad, and let me ask you your opinion, because I think we do kind of agree. If you go back to Carlsbad, that was a very hard track, blue grooved, almost like a TT surface at the end of the day. And if you've got dirt bikes and ATVs playing together on that track, kind of works out. It's okay. We used to race. I didn't do a lot of racing, but I raced some. I was an enthusiast. I suck. But I had fun being a mid-packer locally. And, we used to race a place called Gravel Rama, and the whole track was pea gravel. and it's at a place called the IOK where they do a gravel-rama event every year, hill drags, sand, gravel drags. And we kind of got along together there pretty well, bikes and quads. I remember when I was still racing there, Aaron Plessinger was there racing on a 50 and a 65. And we kind of played together there well. But on a modern motocross track, talking to guys like Leon and just the guys who I do talk to that go to the nationals, like Dave Trimble and his son, they chisel plow these tracks so deep. And when I go to Aaron Scott Plessinger's private track, it's always so ruddy. I get there and I look at it and I'm like, oh crap, like I don't want to walk across that track because there's so many ruts. A good dirt biker looks at that and goes, yeah, fast. I look at that on a quad and go, ugh, destroying the bottom of my bike. I just feel like on a modern motocross track, the way they're prepping things these days, bikes and quads are kind of incompatible. And I'm sure there's lots of people that will disagree, but
the quads are going to come in there and flatten out the ruts and going to make it, the track's going to change for both dynamics every time they go back out on the course, which here's the key. Everybody forgets we're racing motocross. It's not supposed to be groomed. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be rough. It's supposed to be hard. And you know what? These sissy-ass modern day motocross guys need to go back and race some of the old school stuff where it was not groomed and it was rough. And what they did at Carlsbad is they turned the sprinklers on and it would only get a portion of the track, and you'd go ride practice in the muck. And by the end of the day, it was hard. The lines were all different and it would beat you to death. So don't groom it, ride it and shut up, because that's what you get paid for. You get paid a lot of money to go out and put a show on for the fans, and it doesn't matter what the terrain is. And that's just my opinion on it. And our ATV guys would probably just go out and ride it and love it. And they might be a little upset with it, but you know what? They would all get over it because they want to race. Bottom line, at the end of the day, the ATV guys just want to go race and do their job, and they're not going to care. To be at the big show, they're just not going to care. So,
well, I mean, and I think that the ATV guys would get over it quicker than the dirt bike guys because now all of a sudden you're racing your ATV in front of 10,000 fans. So hell yeah, the quad guys. I mean, I love what you're saying, and it gets me excited to hear it. It's like, yeah, guys, be men. Quit bitching and get out there and fight. Quit being a crybaby. You're in the toughest, one of the toughest sports on the planet, probably right next to MMA, and as far as how brutal it can be. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man up, but I look at the face of these jumps that these guys are sending in, and I look at it from the quad guy perspective too, not just from the dirt bike perspective. When you got 20 ruts that are going across the face of a big, huge jump, yeah, I don't know how the quad guys would get along with that. I don't know if the track would set up like that, and that might come down to prep as well. But usually the face of a jump isn't chisel plowed, but yet they still get 28-inch deep, 10-inch deep ruts in them.
Well, they would also have to modify a little bit how they prep it. But you're also looking at, you're going to have practice with the quads, so the ruts aren't going to get as deep because the quads are going to go out there and get rid of some of them. So it's going to change the whole layout of the course. And Moto 1, the track's going to be one way for the bikes, and in Moto 2, it's going to be a totally different way. Same with the ATVs. And this is going to take a guy like Hetrick that can ride anything, and it's going to elevate his game. Wienen, same thing. He's going to rise to the occasion. And I think there's a couple like Wesley Wolf wouldn't care. He would just come through the pack and say, let's do this. Because if you've watched some of the videos of Wolf ride, that guy is on the gas. And if somebody doesn't, reach down and grab him and get him on a fixed support deal, I feel bad for the industry, because that guy is super talented. If I had the money, that would be my guy. Nothing against Max. Him and Max would probably be the two younger guys that I would pick. The only reason I'm not saying Bryce Ford is because he's already got a great deal. He's not gonna come across the lane. Um, uh, Rastrelli's got a freaking pretty good program going. Might need a little bit of help, but right now the two young guys that are freaking lighting the fire under everybody is Wolf and Lindquist. Janusa is another guy that's got a good deal, and Janusa probably would fare well in that environment as well. So,
well, going back to the track discussion, back in the early '90s, before I ever even bought my first four-wheeler, I was still kind of a two-wheeler fan. And, we used to go to a local track, Dirt Country. They did night races on Saturday night. It's always really exciting to go there. I mean, there was a lot of people that turned out, the smell of bean oil in the air, because everybody almost was on two strokes still at the time, except for that occasional oddball that would show up on a four stroke. Just a great time in life. And this was a very technical track. You think about tracks now and the way bikes they're so powerful and they're so fast. And we're talking 90. Four strokes weren't a thing yet, unless you were racing like an XR 600, or maybe you were some oddball that showed up on something like a KTM, but nobody raced KTMs back then unless you were in the trees, or showed up on a Husaberg, these are few and far between. But it was mostly all two strokes, and not only did they have the track. Let's do that first. The track was very supercrossy. Looking back to that point in time, it was like, man, that track had triples, big doubles. It was a technical track. It was very supercrossy for a local track, lit up at night. Anyway, so they had a thriving ATV scene at that track for a good while. My buddy Dave Trimble used to race there, and heck, I think the first time I ever met Dave and never got to talk to him, he overjumped a double in practice and came off the track, and I'm pretty sure that was him who almost took me out. Good thing I was fast and saw him coming, because I had to dive. But yeah, quads and bikes got along. The tracks back then, they were still prepping them. They were still tilling them up and watering them, and it seemed like everybody got along and everybody went fast and people were sending it. The fast guys were sending all the big jumps. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been proven through decades past that we can play together.
there was more testosterone in the industry then, and they used it on the track and instead of in the pits. And nowadays everybody wants to be a keyboard warrior and whine and cry. Just go out there and ride your machines and let's just do this. That's what I want to see. I just want them to see him man up and ride.
And when you're talking about the different racers programs, we're sort of having two different conversations at once now. But do you think that one thing that's holding back, and this is a point I've never heard anyone make, in the second coming of ATV racing back in the early mid 2000s, when you had Kawasaki and you had Can-Am and you had factory Suzuki, you had all these young riders, the top 10 guys, or better, were all taken into these factory teams to where, they had arguably better equipment on a lot of those teams. Like the Suzuki guys were getting parts that you can't go buy right now. At the time, they were getting suspension earlier. They were getting, full tie Yoshimura exhausts, not, where even the silencer body itself was titanium. They were very light, just trick stuff, titanium components in the bikes. But more than that, you had guys like Jimmy White and, you had Wayne Henson over at Suzuki. So I almost feel like, and Wayne's been in and around the sport for a long time, knows a lot. And then, if you've got Jimmy White as your team manager, these are guys that have been in the sport forever. And now you're on these teams and you've got access to these older guys that have been around the sport way longer, that can play a little bit more of a mentor role to a young Chad Weenan who, just got signed by, Kawasaki or something, or, a Dustin Wimmer who was battling with Gus and then was brought on to Team Suzuki, where he had the access to talk to guys like Gustin Jones and Wayne. How much do you think the lack of factory opportunity and and not just the equipment, but the mentorship that comes along with it, how much do you think that's affecting all of the other riders besides, Hetrick and Weenan, who don't have a chance to get a factory ride? How much is that hurting their learning curve?
I think it's hurting it a great deal. I think you're losing some talent as well because of it, because you're seeing people maybe not veer into ATVs or not further their racing because there's no factory future in it. So you lose some fast, talented riders to the workforce because they go further their career in whatever it is they've chosen to do for the rest of their life, whether it be construction or tech or whatever it is. And you have Jeremiah Jones, who is probably one of your best, I don't even know the best word for speaking of this, if you're looking for a guy that can break down your riding skills and your line choices, he's probably one of the best. Another great mentor is Chad Weenan himself, who's mentoring Max Lindquist. Johnny Hale's working with Wesley Wolf, and he's doing a great job with mentoring him. Was Johnny in the factories? Not that I'm aware of. You're having a couple other guys do some mentoring. Yeah, we're hurting. We're hurting for the high skill level guys. Some of them went to the motorcycle industry, and then some of them have just left because there's no financial future for them. So yeah, we're hurting in those regards, but we also have guys that are learning the old school way, where you showed up in the back of your pickup truck, you do it for the love of the sport, and you're building your own knowledge and platform. And yeah, the cycles put us back a little ways, but it's building grassroots, or strengthening the root base of ATV racing so that the true love of the sport is rising through. And that's something that's going to cause another coming of another 450 or two and a factory deal, because the financial future is going to change. You're going to see another cycle of it. I just hope that the factories, when they come back this time or get involved, will get involved in such a way that they support the companies that are there and help the industry maintain and grow, versus kneecapping it and destroying it like they did the last time they were there. And yeah, I'm not happy with them. Still not happy with them, but that's neither here nor there. A couple guys succeeded from it and have great lives because of it, where the rest of the newcomers and the guys that stayed suffer a little bit because they didn't understand what was happening. But that's neither here nor there. That's another show complaint. We originally wanted to get on here and talk about some stuff before we jump into the 2025 lineup of a new machine that's lighting the industry on fire. I want to talk about Vegas to Reno for a moment and get your thoughts on the professionalism of how Best in the Desert is reached out. They had an incident with a truck and an ATV, and Best in the Desert is internally investigating and handling this issue. I know on social media they're kind of trashing Best in the Desert, or BITD, for not being more open to the public, but it's a sensitive subject, and the parties that involved are handling it with Best in the Desert. And I think that we all need to respect this process and let them take care of it. I want to know what your thoughts are. I know you're not as deep into it as I am, but you still have an opinion from the outside world.
Well, I mean, full disclosure, I mean, all I know is what you told me, and that was a truck racer hit a quad racer pretty darn hard, enough to destroy the quad and spit the rider off. Rider's not killed or seriously injured, from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. And people are just, what's that?
He's okay.
Excellent. And then best in the desert's just not saying enough, fast enough. So I think, from what I know, it's like, okay, well, number one, the guy's not dead. Thank God. And that's thank God. So let's get past that. And then beyond that, when you run an organization, now we're not talking about Donald Trump got shot and 2 months later they still can't tell us what happened. We're smart enough to have a supercomputer in our hand, but they can't tell us 2 months later where in the chain of command there was a failure. All right. And we're talking about the Secret Service and every intelligence community that we have in the government collectively can't put a freaking story together. So, I would say I would give Best in the Desert a little bit of time to pull it together and get the facts straight, because, they probably have to decide, like, was this truck racer at fault? Is he worthy of a penalty? Do they need suspension? Do they need fining? You don't want to come out and stick your foot in your mouth. I mean, I'm comparing two different things, but I write for a living and produce content for videos. And every now and then I make a little mistake on something that I actually knew, because I misspoke, or I just wrote it wrong and then read it and it never connected, because you do it every day. And so, I assume these guys are just trying to take the time to get their story straight, so that when they come out and they have a decision and they have a ruling, it's based on their best ability to gather the facts. So, I know we live in this instant gratification lifestyle, but let's be honest, if we were operating in a pre-internet era, back when we got our news from, reading Dirt Wheels monthly, or we watched Moto World with Larry Myers when it came on, you'd probably be waiting a month to even know that happened.
That's one of the things nobody would have ever known, because in the old days it traveled through the racing community versus the news media. Nobody ever published it.
Yeah, and who filmed it?
Cover something like that because we can't can't do that because it would look bad on our industry. Well, social media just throws the cover off of it and just exposes it. What I was trying to get at is the weekend warriors on the keyboard that are there for the ATV guys. Hey, I get it, man. I'm on the ATV guys side too, but let's back down just a little bit and let the company handle it. And they are, just so everybody knows, Best in the Desert is very aware that the ATV community is upset, but that's not the only community they deal with, and they have to get this right. And they're working on it, and all parties are involved and informed. And that's just what I want to convey here, so that give them the room to do their job. They're not the U.S. government that's trying to push it under the rug and protect everybody's job. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing, they're going to do it right.
Yeah, and I'm not taking any blame away from anybody if somebody did something wrong in this. I find it very unlikely. I heard that the truck who hit the quad didn't stop and to make sure that the rider was okay and wait for help. And from what I've been told, if you stop to aid someone in Best in the Desert, they give you your time back from when you stopped. So yeah, should the driver have stopped? Yeah, probably, maybe, most likely, most definitely. But
you should have,
and it comes kind of back to like personal responsibility. Like me, am I going to get out on a sport quad and go run the same track with my 60 horsepower, 55 horsepower four-wheeler as these guys in a 800 horsepower trophy truck, where I'm going through the sand at 50 and they're coming behind me at 100? I'm not going to put myself in that situation, because I understand the risks. And for me, I'm not willing to take that kind of risk. If you do, shit could happen. It's like you jump on a three-wheeler and you tip it over and then you want to blame Honda. Well, I mean, unless this trophy truck guy ran this four-wheeler guy over on purpose, which probably did not happen. When you jump on that quad and you go race on a trophy truck track, think before you go. And I'm not saying don't go, by all means, go. I'm not that brave. There are obviously riders out there who have way bigger balls than me, and kudos to them. But when you jump out in front of trophy trucks, every now and then, yeah, you can't go as fast as them. That's going to be a problem.
And this is one of the things that not everybody's taking into consideration, that the area that this happened was very rutted. Nobody's heard the story from both sides, and Best in the Desert has gotten the two parties together. So they've communicated. Best in the Desert is communicating with them, and they're handling it. There will be a press release on this, and they will come out with it. So all I'm trying to do is just say, hey, everybody, back her down on beating up on Best in the Desert and the truck guy. And yes, we need to support the ATV guy, but give them a chance to come up with a solution. And if there's any penalties or any punishments given, let Best in the Desert handle it, and watch and see what happens. Because I have good insight on this, or internal knowledge, and they are going to make the right choice, and they're going to do justice to the situation. So please let them do their work. Please. That's all I'm asking.
I think people are very short on patience with the internet world that we live in. They need to know the answer instantly, and then they're over it, and then they don't care. Like, if they got the answer today, they could be mad as hell today. They could have, but if they'd had the answer 3 minutes after it happened, then it would literally be out of their mind completely. They wouldn't even remember it hardly. That's where people's level of focus is at today, and
you brought up the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The mainstream media is not even covering it anymore, and it's still an ongoing investigation, which should have been solved, 5 days, 6 days after the deal, because they had all the information. Yeah, but I don't want to get into politics. So, brother, you brought some interesting information to me. We're going to shift gears right into 2025 Can-Am. I know that you've been chomping at the bit to talk about this. So there's a new machine out, and you called it, what, a year ago?
Yeah, thanks. You knew I wanted to talk about calling it. Every now and then when you make a prediction and you get it right, it feels good. And so
last year, let's hear what this machine is.
So last year, Can-Am has made, let's go back 10 years. Can-Am has been making for quite a while now an Outlander 850 and a 1000. And the Outlander is, for those who don't know, I'm sure most guys do, Outlander is their sport utility 4x4. It's got racks, it's got a hitch. You can work with it, and it's just stupid fast. I don't remember what the exact horsepower was on the 850. We kind of were like, why test the 850? Let's just test the 1000. 850 just has a little less horsepower. So we never got around to that unit, but it shares the same chassis and suspension historically with the Renegade 850 and 1000. Now, the Renegade 850 was discontinued, I want to say last year or year before. And then they have a Renegade 650. But so all the big bore stuff, all the big bore twins have traditionally shared one chassis. Suspension tuning would be different. Plastic body styling would be different. Obviously, the Renegade is what, guys like Cody Collier and Brandon Frazier are racing in GNCC. So these guys, more race cut fenders, no racks. Last year, well, not quite. Let's not get to that point yet. Besides the 850 and the 1000 and the 650, Can-Am also made an Outlander 450 and a 570. Those two units used a totally different chassis than the 850 and the 1000. It was its own unique thing, didn't have as much ground clearance, didn't have as much suspension travel, was a smaller body style. It was more of a mid-size 4x4 than a true full size like the 650, 850, or the 1000s were. Well, for 24, Can-Am decided, and I think a lot of this was in response to, CF Moto coming into the market and delivering a lot of accessories stock for the money and a growing level of performance for the money, and now becoming more refined. So they were kind of like, okay, we have to figure out a way to get our price a little bit more in check. So 450 and, producing a 570 V-twin, a V-twin engine is added expense compared to a single cylinder. You've got two heads, you got two cylinders, you got two valve trains, you got more cams, more expense.
The crank is harder. You got to work on the transmission. The chassis got to be a little different. I mean, you're talking about a complete upgrade over that single cylinder machine, because you're going to have more horsepower, which is going to give more twist in the front. I mean, there's a lot of engineering that's going to go into making that twin versus that single cylinder. So yeah, go on.
And the 450 was kind of like between the two engines. It's like, if you wanted a little torquier kind of motor, you bought the 450. You bought the Outlander 450. If you wanted more of a zippy, rippy kind of sporty engine, the 570. Before it was the 570, it was the 500L. We did a shootout with it years ago. It won. Controversially a little bit, but it won. Go watch it. So anyways, fast forward to 2024, Can-Am invites us out and says, well, now we have a new ATV. It's, we have a new 500 and 700 Outlander, and they're all single cylinder. And basically, it's kind of confusing. It's sort of a clone bike. The 500 and 700 that came out for 24 that we rode. This is bad marketing on Can-Am's part. They need to change it, and I'm going to continue to preach about it. They're 650s. They're both a 650 single, and they call it a 500 and a 700. The main difference is ECU tuning, and I believe camshaft.
Same engine displacement.
Same engine displacement. You could literally buy
that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and it's confusing to the end consumer. It is, because what they're doing is, their reasoning behind it is they're trying to relate it to horsepower. So if you're looking at that King Quad 500 or that Kodiak 450 or that Sportsman 450, which is really a 500, it's a 499. It's not a 449. Or a 450. But, regardless, if you look at the Can-Am 500, they're detuned to 650, makes about the same horsepower as the competition's 450 to 500 class machine. And then for some reason, they didn't really target the 700 version, which all the difference is again, camshaft, ECU tuning, a little more more horsepower, a little more torque. But they didn't really talk much about going after Grizzly 700, and they should have, because it's a Grizzly 700 competitor. It's a King Quad 750 competitor. It makes, I believe it was 50 horsepower for their 700 version, but again, they're both 650s. I think it's confusing. I think they should just call it like 650 and 650R. And then the R version is the higher horsepower. If you get the 650 base model, it's whatever it is, 40 something, 30, upper 30s, lower 40s, whatever it is. I didn't pay attention. I'm looking at the high horsepower model a lot more. So that's stuck in my head, because the number on that 700 was a little more than a Grizzly 700. And it was right there with the King Quad 750, maybe a scooch more, but it's very close. It's very close, give or take. It's a 700 class competitor. So that was the confusing part. And they worked great. Good engines, whatever. I like, the motor in it was good. But what really stood out was the chassis, because we rode them at the former UFC fighter Cowboy Cerrone's ranch, and he races side by side. So for whatever reason, we're having a 4x4 press ride on a side by side short course track with lots of jumps, some of which we got to jump. Would have liked to have been in the woods, but some things just really stood out about this chassis. Like, there was a downhill jump where you could kind of send it down the hill. There was a tabletop we were hitting, and me and Jeff Henson talked a lot about that bike, and because we were both at that press event, and we were just like, man, did you ever bottom it out? I don't know, maybe once when I really jumped down the hill a long way and slapped the front end on the ground, maybe. But, that chassis was super stable. The suspension had great hold up to bigger hits. And it was like, to me, I even commented, if you go back and watch the test, and unfortunately I found I had proof of documenting this, I'd said in our test that this chassis feels like it can deal with more horsepower than it has, which was not a crack on the engine at all. It was more or less an observation that, man, this chassis is good. Like, the chassis is good. It's not divey. It corners extremely flat. It's like, bring on the horsepower. And I had talked to Ed Texera, who owns Texera Tech, and his A-arms are pretty much used by almost everyone on Pro Row in the 4x4 class, and probably deeper into other classes. If you're riding a Renegade or an Outlander that's set up for cross-country racing and you've got A-arms, it's probably Texera Tech's arms. So I told Ed, like, you might be okay for the next year or two, but you better get ready, because I have a feeling that new chassis that's on 500 and 700 is going to be taking over in the 850 and 1000 segment, because even though we're riding them with way less horsepower, it feels more capable. It's got more wheelbase. It's more stable. The suspension, even as a sport utility, seemed good. And that was, with base shocks. They didn't have an XTP version of the 700 with, Fox QS3 piggyback shocks. They were just gas charged shocks. And here we are a year later, and it's like, here it is, boom. The Outlander 850 and 1000 are now based on the same chassis that we rode last year with the 500 and 700. And if he's not mistaken, Jeff Henson looked up the part number, and the 1000 frame is the same part number as the 700, 500 frame. So that chassis was probably developed for the 1000 and 850, originally released for the 500, 700. Now it's been carried over to the 850 and 1000. And, the last one we tested in our last test, Outlander and Renegade, were their Gen 2 chassis, which was a big step forward in, strength and durability. And I think this one's going to be an even bigger leap forward than the Gen 2 chassis was, as far as being robust and tough. And I think it's definitely going to handle better than the old chassis based on what we experienced with the 500 and 700. The benefit for Can-Am is that they are using essentially the same frame and some of the same suspension parts. I don't know if we did not ask. I don't recall anyone asking if the control arms, A-arms and swing arm, or no swing arm on this one, no trailing arms. The old Gen 2 model had trailing arms. It basically came back from the frame and out a bit. Kind of like trailing arms on a side-by-side. The Gen 3 chassis has gone to a dual A-arm in the rear, which was a big break from what Can-Am, has been traditionally using on ATVs for a lot of their existence and their lineup. So
let me ask you this, Joe. do you think that the model that you rode, other than the engine and some of the electronics, are interchangeable? Have we got that far yet?
The frame's interchangeable.
So I can take the smaller motor out and put the larger motor in.
I don't think you ever would, but it if Jeff is correct, and we were just BSing on the phone, just having guy talk. We weren't coming to publish it and say this is a fact. But he looked up the part numbers and said it looked like it was the exact same part number for the 700 chassis and the 1000. We did ask Can-Am point blank, is this based on that? Is the 1000 chassis based on the 500, 700 chassis? And they pretty much said, yeah, it's the same thing. So by them using one chassis throughout the entire lineup, because before they had the 450, 570 chassis that was the same. And then they had the 650, 850, 1000 chassis that was the same. Now they have one chassis throughout the entire lineup, which really simplifies the catalog. It simplifies the production line. It will help them keep costs in check, which with the inflation we've had is a smart move. And frankly, I like the way it handled so much in the 700 and 500. It's like, where's the loss? There really isn't one. If it's going to be a step forward for the 1000 and 850, which I think it definitely will be, then it's even better in a 500 and 700, because if it can take the beating that 1000 can dish out, it should be stupid durable with a 700 engine in it. So as a guy who likes to see things last and doesn't like to see people having to go back to the dealer for repairs and gusset this, gusset that, I mean, boy, seeing it used in the 1000 chassis makes me even more keen on, I'd go buy an Outlander 700 if I was in the market for a new 4x4, because you're getting a 1000 chassis for your 700 overbuilt. Should be.
Let me ask you this question. If you took the 700 Can-Am, could you make a class for 700s or 750s?
I talked to Cody Collier about this the other day, and I guess they had a lights class before that was for the smaller displacement engines, and they discontinued it because they wanted to fill the gates. They wanted to have classes that were full. So instead of splitting them down, if you're in the B class or the C class, whatever, I'm not trying to talk like I know a lot about G and CC classification, but if you're not a pro rider, if you're in a more beginner level class, then, does having a 1000 or a 700 really matter that much? Or is it just going to be based upon how good you are as a rider? And it probably comes more down to rider.
If I have a 700 or a 750 class, how many different manufacturers am I going to get on that line?
A lot. I mean, if you're going to have it, I mean, what's the bottom end of it? That's the question. If you did a single cylinder class, because that's really what we're talking about. If they did a single cylinder class, Honda has their 4x4 Rubicon, formerly the Rincon, Yamaha Grizzly, King Quad 750, CF Moto 600. You could even bring in like a Sportsman 570. They're not that down on horsepower, compared to the 700s. I mean, you're talking like 44 horsepower versus maybe 50. So
wouldn't there be a benefit in doing away with the upper RPM, the upper, like the thousands, move them aside and race the smaller bore machines to increase the class size and the availability of machines? Wouldn't that be something that the promoter would look at and say, hey, we want to have this class with this many manufacturers versus this class with one manufacturer?
It would, if I think that
I'm just throwing it out there because listening,
sure.
I'm not a utility guy. I'm a sport quad guy, and I'm a little behind the eight ball here. I'm just winging it with the knowledge that you have. Wouldn't it be smarter to do this?
I mean, and yeah, there's a good argument for it. There's the good argument for it is Can-Am that I know of doesn't support anybody at this point in 4x4 ATV racing. From what I've heard from Cody Collier, they don't support him, and he's the champion. So, it's kind of like we're lucky that Yamaha still supports anybody at all, because do they really have to? Absolutely not. They don't have to, and they know it. So
So
and
that's
so
what
this
I'm saying. Does
game,
Yamaha have a sport utility that could race in the single cylinder class?
does who Yamaha?
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
there you go.
The Grizzly 700 is great. I mean, Suzuki's got one, Honda's got one, Yamaha's got one, Can-Am's got one, CF Moto's got one. Polaris, like I said, the 570s aren't bad. They're not that down on horsepower. Yeah, you could have six companies, and maybe I'm missing somebody else. I probably am. Sorry if I didn't mention your favorite color brand, but yeah,
And
you could have six companies contest it, but nobody thinks that you can race a Raptor 700 because everybody races a YFZ 450R. And if you're not racing a YFZ 450R, you're just not a serious racer. So,
I,
the
I get
racer,
I get where you're at.
same
But
thing,
I think it's for the promoter to change the rules and go, hey guys, we just changed this class so that all of you can compete in this level. And I think that's going to increase because the machines cost less.
the machines cost less. They're not going to break as much because they're not making as much horsepower, which I feel like we're going off on a tangent. We should go back to this 1000. But yeah, they're not going to self-destruct as quickly because they don't have the thrust. They don't have the acceleration. So they're not going to hit things as fast, as hard. They weigh notably less. A Grizzly 700 weighs in the 700-ish pound range, 730, 750. I mean, it's not in front of me, but it's 700 and something pounds versus, and that's curb weight. Yamaha gives curb weights. The estimated dry weight of a new Outlander 1000 XTP, which if you were going to go buy the new Can-Am 1000 and you wanted the Gen 3 platform, that unit has an estimated dry weight of 1,000 pounds. Now, that's what it says on Can-Am's website. If they put the number for the 2-seat max model for the single seat, that's on Can-Am. But we looked it up the other day, and they said estimated dry weight was 1,000 pounds. So if it's really that much, that's a lot of weight to slam into a tree, to break things with.
I'm just thinking, not to change the subject, but I'm just thinking about the way that we're promoting some of these races or race classes doesn't make any sense for promoting the manufacturers and promoting the machines that we have. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, you would definitely have a much more highly contested if Yamaha would sponsor people, if Suzuki would sponsor people. They might. If they said if the Coombs said next year, hey, there's only one manufacturer making a 1000, so and we have 6 manufacturers that make big bore singles, that's going to be the new pro class. We don't care how you feel about it. That is what it is. That's what you're going to race next year because that creates more sponsorship opportunity for you as the racer and us as the series. I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense. But Can-Am might not be the only people with a 1000 that can race G and CC for long. There might be something coming.
What do you know?
Well, I mean, let's go back to Can-Am first, and then we can kind of go back to that. So the new 1000 is it's the G3 frame. It's 95% of the new 850 and 1000, and 95% of the parts are new. That's how new the bike is. It's a brand new engine. Now, more confusion because for some reason Can-Am likes this, but the 850 and the 1000, traditionally the 850 was basically an 850. The 1000 basically was a 1000, but now the new 850 and the 1000 are both, wait for it,
1,000.
1000s. Yeah, 999 cc's, whether you buy the 850 or the 1000. And it was funny because Can-Am sat there during the media roundtable and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know, what's really good is that the person who buys," my Can-Am accents or my Canadian accent's terrible. "The person who buys the 850 is really getting a 1000 at a much better deal." Blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, why don't you tell them that? Why don't you stop saying 850 and 1000 and just call it a 1000 and a 1000R so we can know what we're buying. I don't know if it's they're like they don't want to say that they only make two displacements. You can get a 650 or a 1000, but that's what you're getting if you buy into Can-Am. And I would, at this point, I think I'd happily probably buy into Can-Am because I think the machines are going to be outstanding. The new 850, aka lower horsepower 1000, puts out 82 horsepower. So in the 850 segment, that 1000 is class leading. I haven't ridden either one of these bikes yet. I have a feeling we're going to get to ride them in the near future. I'm just guessing now. I'd probably buy the standard 1000, what they're calling an 850. 91 horsepower before, which is what they had in the 1000. It was 91. The new low horsepower 1000, the 850 is 82. Man, that's still more than almost anybody can use. I'm telling you, that's probably the one to buy. I'd have to look at the MSRPs back to back, but I can't see buying the big horsepower one for me. It's 101 horsepower for the 1000 version of the 1000, which I think they need to call it 1000, 1000R. Let the R be the high horsepower version. It'll make sense to people a lot more than explaining this over and over and over again. It's ridiculous.
What's the top speed?
They haven't said.
I wonder. I mean, can we roll this into a desert race machine? You know, I mean,
yeah, I don't know. It not without major pain. I look at the Scrambler S right now, and yeah, okay, this little Scrambler S 1000 from Polaris, it's only 89 horsepower, but it's got 12 and a half inches of travel in the front, 14 in the back, 55 inches wide, ton of ground clearance. Now, the new Can-Am, what's good about it is it's still 48 and a half inches wide. So it'll fit on any 50-inch trail. It's not a ride on top side by side like a Scrambler S. It is a true ATV trail width machine. And it, for being 48 and a half inches wide, it's packing some suspension travel. It's got 10.8 inches in the front. It's got 12 inches in the rear. It was a significant increase. It was a little under 2 inches in the front and about 2 inches in the back. They increased the travel. So, the increase in suspension travel was significant. One of my biggest issues with the original Outlander Renegade platform was the wheelbase was short, and in the Grizzly 700, that's not such a big deal because you're like, oh, I've got this 700 single, but it's got a short wheelbase. I can wheelie it. If I come up on a log or a ditch, I can lean back and wrap it and I can bring the front end up and it makes it sporty. Well, when you were on a 91 horsepower 1000 coming off the line, if you put that thing in sport mode and straight just punched it, it would rat trap you. It was brutal. This one, even though, thank God they did it, going up from 91 to 101 horsepower on the Outlander 1000, they did increase the wheelbase from 51 to 52 and a half inches. So it did gain 1.5 inches of wheelbase, which it needed a lot. So I think that'll be a nice noticeable improvement. And yeah, I think you might see a couple 4x4 pro guys next year racing on an Outlander instead of a Renegade, because the Renegade did not get the new platform yet. Like I said at the beginning of this long-winded rant about this new machine, Renegade and Outlander traditionally were the same chassis and suspension. For 25, Outlander is getting the Gen 3 chassis, the increased suspension travel with the A-arms in the back and 10 more horsepower. Renegade is still on the old platform, engine and chassis and suspension. I'm assuming that they're doing that now. We asked during the media roundtable. It was hosted by Dustin Jones, who's a real lovable character if you don't know him, and he's been a mud racer for them, and he's kind of almost a brand advocate on some level. Real likable dude. But I asked in the media roundtable discussion, okay, when is the Gen 3 platform coming to Renegade? And Dustin Jones like, oh man, I'm so glad somebody asked this in the chat. First thing I said when I rode this new Gen 3 chassis in Outlander is, whoo, when's this thing coming to Renegade? And it is. They didn't say when. I would assume it's going to be for 2026. I would bet they get through the 2025 season and they don't do a 25.5 early release, because they're not still selling the Renegades as 24s. If they were, I'd expect maybe a 1.5-year model, like a 25.5 release for a new Renegade. Since they've already released it as 25, I wouldn't expect it before 26, but it might happen. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and I hate to say it, but man, if I was looking at buying a Renegade this year,
I'd wait a year.
I'd have to park my money, unless I'm just rich. If you want to buy one this year and go buy one next year, by all means, Can-Am would like your money. The dealership would like your money. But if you're a working clown like me and Lenny,
$34,000 in ATVs.
Right. If you're rich, if you're a working man like me or Lenny, you might want to park your money for 12 months.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy the 110.
The 110?
Yeah, because I can afford the 110.
Right. That's yeah, that's more in my price. That's more in my budget.
And when I fall off the 110, it's not gonna hurt as bad.
No, it won't.
No. You've heard my stories. Keeping it shiny side up is not one of my fortes. So I can't wait to get a chance to get close. You know me, I'm diehard sport quad guy. I'm really getting excited about learning more about the utility sport quads. And I want to know how we get in touch with the powers that be and ask them the question, hey, why are we not making choices that increase our sport versus decrease it?
Well, I mean, we do. It's like, how do we get in touch with the powers that be to ask them these questions? And the answer is we do. We do it all the time. And we're going to keep doing it. Every chance we get to get in front of an OEM, you've got guys like me, Jeff Henson, John Arns, who runs ATV Illustrated. You've got guys like us, and we get, we're right up there in their face, like, great, sport quad, why not? And and they all have their excuses, and we're going to continue to beat the drum, and Can-Am is giving us another reason to do that with this machine, because unlike Honda, who only builds relatively mild, very reserved four-wheeled off-road vehicles, Honda doesn't build anything that's radical. They don't. They build some radical dirt bikes. Love to own them. They built some radical crotch rockets. They don't build anything radical in the four-wheeled space, side by side or ATV. It's all very reserved, not super powerful, not the longest suspension travel. So, I don't know what Honda's excuse is other than just like maybe they are scared of liability. Obviously, Can-Am, they don't give a shit. If they're building a 101 horsepower ride-on ATV, hey, more power to them. If you jump on that thing, you're responsible when you pull the trigger.
Yeah, exactly. So there's zero reason why they shouldn't be building a 450 Sport Quad to compete with Yamaha.
Well,
Make sure it's better than the freaking last one they built.
Well, I'm gonna give you my opinion, and I think that I think my brother Jeff would agree. When we're watching the Can-Am presentation, me and Jeff are texting back and forth, and when they get to the new, Maverick R, which is their 240 horsepower 4-seat version of the Maverick R Max, where that is, I said to Jeff, how much of this presentation do you think is going to be about the vehicle? Or which part of this presentation is going to be longer? The part talking about the car or the part talking about the accessories? And I swear it was the accessories. There's your answer.
So let me ask you this question. You brought up CF Moto earlier because they're trying to start to compete with your sport utility market. Do you think that that is a company that could come in with a sport ATV?
I mean, sure. I think any company that has mass production capability can come in with a sport ATV. But the thing is just, do they think it makes financial sense? And
I've seen some of the things that CF Moto sells, and I don't know if they're selling large volumes of some of those versions. But to me, that doesn't make sense to build them because they're not what I would call public. It's not a public attraction.
give me an example.
Some of the street bike versions they make, they're just
Okay.
not that cool.
And maybe this is stuff that they're building for the Asian market. I don't pay enough attention to their roadside. I pay more attention to their off-road side. And, I'll say this, they give you a lot of accessories on their stock machines at a pretty low price. I'm not into the big heavy cast aluminum wheels. I think big heavy cast aluminum wheels kind of suck. They add rotating mass. They take away from the fun factor of it. I just ordered a Grizzly 700 for 2025 because they updated the power steering on it, which considering they've been the measuring stick of power steering performance in the four-wheeled ATV segment since they introduced it. Obviously, we're very interested to get our hands on one and see if they've actually made it better. And, you're always worried like, oh, did you mess it up? Because we really like it. I doubt they messed it up. Those guys are dialed. But we're gonna get one of those to test, and we'll see.
Well, there's a lot of cool different things coming, and I just, I know we keep beating up on him for the Sport 450. I believe in my heart something is coming, maybe not in 2025, but I think that there's something being developed because the like I said in previous shows, the industry is so silent. And when the industry's so silent, they're covering it up. Somebody's not talking about it because they don't want it to get out yet because they're not ready. And there may be people in our industry that are working with them and they've, signed NDAs and they can't talk about it either. And they're not even hinting on it because they could lose their job over it.
I don't. I'm not that optimistic yet. I think there may come a time when we get there. I want to circle back real fast because I sort of got derailed on my Yamaha Grizzly point, which was, you know, when we ordered the 25 from Yamaha because of the new power steering, like the CF Moto guys, they like to put these big cast wheels on these things because they look good for the rednecks who think that flashy wheels are important. And I'm telling Yamaha, like, give me the base model Grizzly. We don't want the mud tires. We don't want, we want the lightest tire wheel package you've got because that makes the thing sportier. So yeah, CF Moto still has a little learning to do. But they're getting there and what they give you for the money. But back to the sport quad thing, we were talking last night on the phone and I said, this new Can-Am Outlander 1000 XTP is probably in like the $16,000-ish price range. I don't have the prices exactly in front of me. And, then saying like, well, a new 450 would probably cost like $11,500 or $12,000. And you're like, well, why would it cost that much? Because it would, because of where dirt bikes are and how much higher a sport ATV has traditionally been in the same model year when they've released a new quad with, other new dirt bikes. The quad has been, a certain set percentage, a little bit more in the 2000s era, maybe not in the 80s, because the dirt bikes got way better parts back then than what the quads got. We got crap in comparison as far as stock suspension and things like that. But Can-Am will sell you their 1000 for, let's just say, 15 and change, 16 grand. Well, then they want to sell you the speakers that mount on your front fenders that don't take up your rack space, that are angled at 45 degrees. So they're blaring in your face as you're riding with your helmet on. And then they want to sell you trunks for the front and the back, and they want to sell you a windscreen that you can hide behind, like a fairing, like you're riding a street bike. And they're banking that they're going to sell you that thing, and then that they're going to sell you another $1,500, $2,000 worth of accessories for it. That'll be even at a higher profit margin than the machine, and that's where the dealer is really going to make their money. So I just don't think that manufacturers at this point much care about building a unit that they're not going to sell at least a couple $1,000s in accessories for, which sucks because it's dictating what they sell us. And they're kind of like, we don't care. I don't know what happens with dirt bikes, because are they selling $3,000 of accessories for a dirt bike buyer? I guess it's just historically dirt bikes have mattered, so they continue to matter.
I think, Polaris's marketing deal is accessories. They want to sell everything to you. They don't want the aftermarket guy involved. They want to take care of it all. And I think there's a couple other manufacturers that tried it, like Yamaha tried it, and I think they've realized that they can't.
I think it's what they all want to do now. I really think that it's what most of them want to do. I just don't think the rest of them have gotten as good at it as Polaris. Polaris has that huge #1 market share, and they've been, because they led with the development of so many different side-by-side segments. They have been the leader of every segment at some point, if they're not leading it now. And I'm talking, sport utility, sport, of all sizes from the bottom to the top. They're right there. They're either the leader in the class or they're competitive. And they've been doing so much, so long. They just got their aftermarket line more developed because they have more money, they have more people, they have more machines to develop for. I think it's just the benefit for them of being the biggest in the space that's gotten them to that point. I'm sure I just can't believe that Honda doesn't want to make the same amount of money out of accessories. They just have to make as many cool machines as Polaris and get that market share to do it.
I don't think Honda's got the internal development company or people that understand the aftermarket accessory deal. Like just same with Yamaha. I don't think that they ever figured it out because GYTR sold some stuff, but then now they're tapering off. They're not selling near as much. They've discontinued a bunch of product. Um, I don't know. Polaris does have a good idea, but Polaris also went out and bought their competitors. Anybody that
Oh,
was selling product that they wanted, they went out and bought it. So then you had to buy it from Polaris.
a high
And
lifter. I think they bought PRP. Yeah, Polaris has bought a lot of the aftermarket manufacturers that originally were aftermarket makes, manufacturers for the consumer.
yeah,
They're like, let's buy them up, sell them direct, or through dealers. Let's make the money
exactly.
coming.
And it's kind of crazy, the skid plates guy, they bought all that. I think that they do a form of roll cage themselves as well, that you can buy, lights, you can buy other electronics right for your Polaris from Polaris, and you don't even need to go anywhere but to the dealership because they can buy it all and install it right there at the dealership.
Well, and they'll give you your credit card. That's the other thing is that, like,
Yeah.
hey, you want to buy this Polaris Pro R for $40,000. Well, hey, buddy, you're approved for 50. Would you like to finance some tires for 6 years that you might cut one on day one? Seems like a smart investment. Sure, slap them on.
Yeah.
It's part of the game. And a lot of the factory accessories from these companies are great. I mean, they're developed with OEM CAD drawings. Fitment's perfect. It's all developed together, and they're good, but you're going to pay for them.
Right. Yeah, for a long, long time, especially when you finance it on that $45,000 car. Yeah, I get
Believe
it.
me, we've considered the viability of doing a video or an article on what factory accessories you might consider financing and which ones to avoid.
Right.
It's like you're going to finance a windshield. Yeah. Are you an idiot? What are you going to do the first time you put a log through it? A big stick, something goes through it. Your buddy throws a rock and it breaks it. What are you going to do? You're going to finance it for 6 years like a
There's a
dummy.
whole insurance market with these things now, with the UTVs now, where the insurance guys are making a killing because they're destroying these cars and having to go through that. So that's a whole nother
Right.
show right there that we could talk about.
But what is coming? I think that's something we kind of touched on earlier is, what might be. I don't see sport quads coming. I keep getting calls that I don't want. Um,
I
so
honestly think that there's a sport quad thing. I think something's coming in the sport quad industry where we may not see it until 26. Um,
I think there's a KOA 300 coming still.
I believe
Um,
I believe that our industry is so thirsty for that model that if it's half as good as we think it's going to be, the aftermarket industry is going to scoop it up and make it awesome. You know,
my expectations for A300 realistically are going to be notably faster than a 300EX, but needing some refinement.
totally,
That's what I expect. I
totally.
think it's yeah, I think it's going to be notably faster than a 300, but it's going to need some revisions to get it, and that's going to be where KO is going to make it or break it. It's like, are you going to be able to take some constructive direction and make the changes and make them quickly? And from what I've heard from them discussing, and from the discussions I've had with them, I think they're pretty serious. about making this unit happen, and I think they're becoming more serious about it. I recently was told that and we didn't get exceptional numbers on this because, KO is a small manufacturer. They don't have a ton of product awareness, but we did a test on their Jackal 200, which is the A200 in Europe. And that video coming out and the bombing of social media with video clips that came from that test gave KO North America one of their largest spikes in social media interest. And they were able to directly tie it to us reviewing that 200, which has now told all of them at KO, oh, well, if that's what really moves the needle in interest, then there has to be a real interest for a sport ATV. Yeah. So that's great to know. I mean, they're already starting to see that a unit that they've had in the space for a long time, just getting put out there in front of more people creates interest. So, fingers crossed. We'll see that 300. And then another thing that's interesting is for 2025 for Polaris, they have released all their 2025 models, including the Sportsman S, which is the sport utility version of the Scrambler S. It's 55 inches wide, mega long travel, mega high ground clearance. But they have not released any 2025 for Scrambler. There's no Scrambler S for 25. There's no Scrambler 850 for 25. And Jeff from Dirt Wheels emailed a point of contact over at their fleet managing company and said, hey, what about Scrambler for 25? And they said, we can't comment at this time. Well, that means there's something coming.
They've changed it.
There's something coming. Right. If they discontinued it, they would tell us, everything I've heard in 20 years of being in this industry, when you're like, hey, where's this model? They just tell you point blank, it's discontinued or it's going away for 25. When they say we can't comment at this time, it means something new's coming. So is there going to be an updated Scrambler S, or the same Scrambler S come back accompanied by a sub 50-inch version in width, to where there may be a new competitor from Polaris for the Renegade 1000 in that sport 4x4 segment, no racks, no hitch. You may have a new competitor for Renegade. And we keep seeing these patent drawings online of a Yamaha twin cylinder, long travel, high end suspension 4x4. So I don't think we're going to see that for 25, but might we in 26? So you might see a couple new players in that sub 50-inch, or at least in the sport 4x4 segment, some updates or new models in the next 12 to 24 months.
I would love that. And I hope it happens. The last thing before we tune out here, I want everybody to know that I don't have all the specifics, but Angela Moore, the national women's motocross champion in the past, has had some health issues. And I think we all need to send our thoughts and prayers to her, and anybody that's close to her will already know what's going on, and make sure that she gets taken care of. And it's never a positive thing when people in our world are having health issues. So please reach out and pray for their family, and make sure that she makes a quick recovery. So I didn't mean to drag this onto the end of the show. I meant to bring it up earlier, but Angela, we're thinking about you, and we want you to get well. So, Joe, in closing, I know that we could continue talking about this for another 5 hours, but I think that we need to save a little bit for a little bit down the road and get into it. We talked about multitude of different things today, and I'm excited about this sport utility deal from Can-Am. Maybe something new from Yamaha, or Polaris. Not as much. I'm not as excited about hearing new from Polaris, just because I'm not a fan of the model or the manufacturer. But it'd be really great to see something new from Yamaha.
You know, I don't really have brand loyalty. I don't get into it that much. You know, whoever builds something cool that's that's exciting, and you know, I'm behind it. You know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I might have said I'm not a Can-Am guy, but man, those guys have just made big strides. And to me, it's just about, if you're making it tougher, if you're making it newer, if you're making it exciting, I'm a fan of your brand. And you know, we commented in our tests of the 2024 Renegade 1000 out on YouTube now. You can go watch it. It'll be the same as the 25. So watching our 24 test would be as good as us doing a 25 test, because it didn't change. Probably will in 26, like I said, with that G3 platform. But you know, Can-Am, to throw them a bone, you know, we commented in that test of the 24 Renegade. You know, it had a couple changes in 23, and then it had a couple changes back in 20. You know, Can-Am keeps making changes to their machines to make them better. They are seriously competing. They are a very competitive company. I think that everything is moving in the right direction for them as far as building better machines that are going to continue to get better handling, that are going to continue to get tougher. Obviously, durability is of prime interest to me as a working class kind of guy, and looking out for, you know, other people who don't just have disposable income where it's like, oh, you want 50 grand, here's 50 grand. You know, reliability is a big deal. I think Can-Am is going in the right direction with that. I think Polaris is working to move in that direction with things that we've seen with some recent releases. I know for the most recent updates to the Razor XP, their naturally aspirated 1000, they did a lot of work to improve the durability of that unit. And I think you're going to see Polaris trying to do as much as they can to distance themselves between, you know, their reputation for underbuilding as they can. You know, I think they're going to try to make their units tougher, longer lasting.
It's going to take a lot of work from them. They're going to have to. It's almost like a reface of the whole company to change the quality issues that they have, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. You know, I know there's people out there that love Polarises and think they're awesome. I'm just not. I've seen another side of the quality issues on most of the Polaris product, and it's just my aversion. If they change it, dude, I'll eat my words and you know, praise them.
Oh, and you got to want to root for them. I mean, you got to want to root for them because they're a North American brand. Right. You know, they are the United States power sports brand. So yeah. I mean, I'm not going to be mad if they build the biggest, the fastest, the toughest, but just make sure it's the toughest. You know, they don't need help when it comes to performance, because they're killing it when it comes to performance.
Right. Right. They are, you know, they're doing something right. They have to be, or they wouldn't be selling the numbers that they are. But Joe, I don't know what you got coming next from ATV On Demand or UTV On Demand. I hope that it's exciting. And when does it drop?
Well, I will be wrapping this week. I'm going to get through our Renegade 110 test video. It'll be a 2025 model test. Didn't change for 25. It's the 110 XXC from Can-Am. It's the Renegade 110 is a 10 and up machine. They say, I'm not going to tell them otherwise, but it's the same size ergonomically as the 70. So you buy whichever one you think fits your kid best. The 90 and 70, you know, being the same size, regardless of the rider. The pegs seat, foot peg, from the pegs, the seat, the bar is all the same, 70 and 110. But the 110 XXC is the version we got. It's a little cooler than the regular 110. The base model 110, I'm going in circles. I apologize to everybody. The 110 Renegade is basically a clone of the Outlaw 110 from Polaris and even the Raptor 110 from Yamaha. Tires are a little different between the three. Plastic is obviously very different, made to look like they're representative stylings from their brands, but essentially the same bike. The Renegade 110 XXC is $500 more expensive. It's a little more special. They put a dual A-arm front end on it, which means that your front tires aren't doing this as they go through the suspension travel, which creates scrub with the ground as the suspension compresses. The tire scrubbing it because the arc of the tire changes with a single A-arm, where with a spindle and a dual A-arm front end, your tire travels more straight vertically, less tire scrub. So between eliminating the wheel scrub and giving it 10% more travel than the single A-arm competitors that it shares a design with, it's a little 110 fuel injected kids quad that's kind of on another level, and love to see Can-Am kick it up a few more notches. So that'll be coming out hopefully not this Monday but the following Monday, and then we will be getting to work on our 1,500-mile review of the Polaris Pro R. So we were just talking about Polaris durability. You'll have to watch that one to see how good their $40,000 machine holds up to 1,500 miles of abuse.
I'm looking forward to that one. Excellent. So, hey, Tuesdays, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, you can catch our audio podcast with whichever guest we're having on during the week. And Wednesdays, 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, you can catch our Instagram bench prep conversation live. There again, guests are always rotating in and out. We had Team USA on last Wednesday. I hope you guys caught that show. On Fridays, you'll usually get a pre-race report, or you'll get the audio version turned into a video version on YouTube. And then on Sundays, you can catch us here live on the morning show. Joe, I always appreciate everything that you're doing for us. Everybody, you need to subscribe to ATV On Demand and UTV On Demand to help Joe out, because he's bringing you things and information that no one else is in the industry, as well as subscribe to Dirt Wheels magazine, because the paperback copy is always best. The smell when you get that new magazine and being able to read those stories, it's very awesome. Please subscribe to ATV-TALK on YouTube or anywhere else that you need to catch all of our shows. You will see, most likely tomorrow, video 3 of the Legends race. We're working on it now, and we apologize for the delay, but it takes a little longer sometimes to bring out some of these videos. Joe knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just a snap of the fingers to bring this content to fruition, but look for it, and we'll get that taken care of.
And Lenny's editing video now, so now he's learning all about pain and suffering.
Yeah, I don't even want to go there, dude. I don't even want to go there. Yes, it takes a lot of time, and it's not my forte. Thank God I have Valeria helping me, and advice from Joe and other people are making it my life a little easier, because they've done it and are trying to pave the road for us so that we're not wasting our time doing things that we shouldn't.
Always glad to help, Lenny.
Love it, brother. Hey, you have an amazing weekend. Don't you have a mountain bike video coming out as well too?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did a review of a hardtail that I bought. I bought a Salsa Timberjack that came out a few weeks ago, and then I got a gig filming trails for our local mountain bike advocacy group here in Cincinnati. So they opened a little bike skills park at a local middle school, which we did a video on. I mean, if you want to check it out, it's cool. If not, whatever. It's mountain bike on demand on YouTube. Go figure. Or I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, so look up MTB, like mountain bike, MTB as in Bob, Cincinnati, or B as in bike, mountain bike. Cincinnati on Facebook, and you can see what I've done as far as trail videos, stuff like that. It's a lot more of hearing my monotone voice and checking out my camera work. So we'll play a little bit more with that. It's for fun.
Well, giving back to the community is always great. And I want to thank you so much for coming on, Joe. And we will catch you next week.
Yes, sir. Have a great Sunday.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you later. Thank you.